And welcome into the MLB Hot Stove Daily here at the Upside Sports Network. My name is Michael. Appreciate you guys taking some time and joining us on a Tuesday evening. A little bit of news out there around Juan Soto. We'll dig into some of that. Not too many transactions today. One move anyway had the Boston Red Sox bringing in Aroldis Chapman. We'll dig into all of that and more next here at the Upside. We'll begin with the one bit of news that actually has happened. Aroldis Chapman, $10.75 million one-year deal for him to go to the Boston Red Sox. Red Sox were said to be looking for a left-handed reliever. They do get that and some closer insurance. Aroldis Chapman, of course, one of the best closers ever in Major League Baseball history. A long cry from that, at least the pinnacle of his career, but he's still a very good left-handed reliever, can be wild at times, and is a terrible guy to hold on base runners. So if you're trying to, minimize the run game late in games, he is not your guy. But he still carries a 14.9 strikeout rate per 9. That's just an incredible rate still at an advanced age. And he's still very effective. 3.79 ERA is indicative of that, and he should be a good get for Boston. Now, of course, this is not the end of their shopping. They're still looking to bring in some starting pitching. They're in on Fried, in on Burns, and a couple of others. They're also said to be looking at the possibility of bringing in Clay Holmes as a starter. His name's been thrown around quite a bit over the last 24 hours. News started to break about 36 hours ago, saying that the Mets were talking about him possibly being a starter for them, getting him out of the bullpen, seeing what he had out there. Let's think of him as a Seth Lugo type who was brought up as a starter, went to the bullpen, and could be moved back to the rotation once he gets some the feet underneath him anyway. Once he gets to the major league level, that's kind of the thinking there for Clay Holmes. But the Red Sox certainly striking early here in free agency. Seen a few moves now over the last couple days. Dodgers, of course, adding a couple of pieces out there. Blake Snell, the biggest of them. Tommy Edman as well. We saw the Mets go out there and get a starter of their own for Frankie Montas, the 2-year deal, $30+ million. Good get for them. The little bit surprising, head-scratching move, if you will, goes to the Chicago Cubs, giving a contract to Matthew Boyd a little bit richer than what I would have at this stage in free agency. And then the Texas Rangers getting arguably the best backup or 1A, 1B catcher, if you will, in Higashioka. A veteran, had a good offensive year last year. He's never going to hit for average, but he does come with a little bit of pop, and that was his best attribute last year. Career highs, home runs, RBIs, OPS plus, all career highs for him. So those are some of the moves we've seen so far. Curious to see what the next dominoes are going to be as we gear up for Major League Baseball's winter meetings next week. One programming note for all of you guys new here at the Upside. We'll be live for you guys during the winter meetings here. Make sure you guys hit that like and subscribe. We'll keep you guys updated as things happen. Yes, we'll be live for the majority of it. We'll also be posting short little videos. That way, if you guys are working and are unable to catch the stream, maybe you can catch that 15-second little clip that we're able to put out. Keep yourselves updated as to what's going on at the winter meetings. Some big moves I am expecting there. The biggest of the dominoes is Juan Soto. I'm expecting him to go down probably around Tuesday. If I had to guess, Scott Boras is looking for some vindication after a rough last year. He's certainly got it so far in free agency. He's done well with his pieces. Already gotten several of his guys already signed. He has plenty more on the market. So he is going to drive up the prices. The news tonight around Juan Soto, of course, is that the bidding is clearly above $600 million. Not a surprise there. We knew it was going to be over 600, 640 probably. At the very minimum right now. Boras from the outset said he wanted to do better than the overall value of what Shohei Ohtani got. In case you guys are wondering, that's $700 million. $700 million. Now, of course, Juan Soto's a younger player. You can stretch out that AAV over a longer period of time, say over a 15 or a 16-year term. That's still an incredibly long time to give a contract to a player, even as talented as Juan Soto is. So we'll see where he goes. The 5 teams that have got to be considered the favorites are going to be the Yankees, Mets, Dodgers, Red Sox, and Blue Jays. I would say it's far more even than it ever has been. And then if I'm a Yankees fan, that has to terrify me because that tells me the money might become an issue, whereas the Blue Jays are now expected to be the highest bidder for him. That's saying something because you're talking about a team in the New York Mets that has endless pockets as well. The Dodgers are printing money out there in LA, and yet it's the Toronto Blue Jays who are the industry consensus as to who might have the highest offer out there for him when it's all said and done. Red Sox are no slouch here. They've been saving up money for years now. They have to do something here, and I believe they will. I think they'll add at least a top-flight starting pitcher, a Max Fried type, and probably a corner outfielder. I just wonder if they're able to do both, bring in Fried and Soto. If they bring in Soto, are they still able to bring in a Fried caliber starting pitcher? Or do they go a little bit cheaper? Maybe a Nathan Eovaldi, who's still a really good pitcher, could still be a number 1 or number 2 in a playoff rotation, but is certainly on the back 9 of his career. So those are some of the headlines I'm keeping my eyes peeled for as to what's going to happen next. Other pieces of news around Major League Baseball. Shohei Ohtani is going to be getting his baseball card collection back from his interpreter that had the gambling issues. The only reason I mention that is because I am a big sports card collector as well. So I hope you guys are paying attention to the market. You might see some unique cards come on the market with Shohei getting those cards back. One other bit of news, anyway, is that the deferred money for the Dodgers has now crossed over the $1 billion threshold from 2028, I believe, through 2046. That's just an incredible amount of money that they're pushing off into their future. And I understand they're printing money out there in LA. And I understand the dollar value now is not what the dollar value is going to be able to be in 20 years from now. I get all of that. But we're still talking about an incredible sum of money. We're not talking about a Bobby Bonilla day for the New York Mets where it's $1 million, for 20, 25 years or whatever the case may be. We're talking about $1 billion to be paid over the course of 20 years. That's on top of whatever team they already have built up at that time. That's a lot of money. And of course, it's LA. I think they'll be just fine. But that's just a mind boggling number to think about how much they're really pushing off into the future with the deals for Yamamoto, for Otani, for Glasnow, for Snell, for Edman. All of these guys have some money that's been deferred. We'll see what they do if they bring in a Juan Soto, how much money of that is going to be deferred if they do bring him in. But I do expect them to add at least one more starting pitcher, one more corner outfielder, and then a couple of bullpen pieces. So Dodgers aren't done. They're still going to be spending this offseason. Some other headlines from around the sport center around Sean Manaea. His name's getting tossed around a little bit more. Teams are seeming to value him as kind of that next tier of starting pitcher behind Corbin Burns, behind Max Fried, behind Blake Snell that could really take the next step and become an ace on a staff. Now, Manaea at one point was a pseudo-ace, if you will, on the Oakland A's, but of course, it's Oakland. I mean, come on. Then, of course, he's bounced around a little bit the last couple of years, struggled out there with San Francisco, found a home last year with the Mets, and really proved his worth there. I'm expecting a significant deal here. Am I expecting something in the neighborhood of 5 for 100? No, but I am expecting a significantly bigger payday than what Frankie Montas got 2 years, 37. I'm thinking we're talking 3 to 5 years minimum. We could be talking in the neighborhood of anywhere from $15 to $25 million, depending on how short that contract is. So we'll see where that number ultimately falls for Sean Manaea, but I really like what we've seen from him. He changed his arm slot this year as well and really seemed to hone his craft better than he had in years past. And he looked like a changed pitcher to me. So the ceiling that we saw with him out in Oakland and what we thought we might be getting at any of the other stops that he's had since then, he's really not lived up to it until this most recent year with the New York Mets. We've seen pitchers off of shorter success stories, i.e. Tyler Anderson with the LA Dodgers, i.e. Andrew Heaney again with the LA Dodgers, really take that short period of time where they showed the skill in a 2-3 month period and then translate that into a big time contract. So I'm excited to see what's going to happen where his free agency goes. I told you guys we'd be getting into some trade possibilities tonight, and we'll get into those in just a moment. Mark, welcome in. For those of you new here, make sure you guys hit that like and subscribe, and we'll keep you guys up to date on all of the latest from around Major League Baseball ahead of the winter meetings. And during the winter meetings, we'll be live, so make sure you join us during that as well. Follow us over on X at UpsideSN and on Facebook, Upside Sports Network. I know a few of you have followed us over there, so we appreciate you guys continuing to support the channel. Reworked the studio today, so hopefully, we won't have any too many technical difficulties. But so far, the studio's been working out a lot better, so makes it a lot more cohesive and a lot easier to work in. So, without further ado, let's get into some of the other headlines. We just talked about the deferred money in the Dodgers deals that they've been signing for Snell and all those other guys. Well, apparently Blake Snell's deal also comes with a conditional club option as well. Another interesting caveat, because Dodgers are continuing to be creative in how they, one, structure the contract as far as years, but also how they're divvying out the money, the signing bonuses, all those kinds of things, how they're affecting the calculations for the CBT. All of these come into play for how they're going to try to build their next contending team. And I would have to say they're already contending the way they are, and they're still going to add more pieces. They are by far the favorite on the National League side as far as I'm concerned. One other bit of news as far as the Juan Soto market goes. We've talked a little bit about the favorites for him, but there are more teams than just those 5 in there for Juan Soto. Teams like the Rangers have placed calls. Teams like the Royals have placed a call. Phillies, Padres, Nationals. Not to say that any of these are the favorite, but just to say that it's just between these 5 teams is a little bit erroneous. You look at the San Francisco Giants, they were expected coming into this year that they were going to be one of the favorites for him to be able to sign there this offseason. They're not even mentioned as one of the favorites or even a dark horse at this point. I think it'd be foolhardy to believe that they're not in the running for Juan Soto. I think there's every reason to believe that they should be in there because they have the money to spend and they need him, a player like him, in the middle of that lineup. They really haven't had that middle-of-the-order presence in that lineup since Barry Bonds retired. Speaking of retirements anyway for the San Francisco Giants, hats off to Brendan Crawford. I haven't really mentioned it yet at this point, but I wanted to make sure to, for those of you who are Giants fans, I know we got 5 or 6 of you guys who watch us pretty regularly that are Giants fans. Hats off to Brendan Crawford on an amazing career. Would have been nice to see him all the way through with the Giants uniform on, but unfortunately didn't happen. But still, either way, he was a great player, and he'll be missed for the San Francisco Giants as they turn the page to their next contending team. So we'll see what that team looks like. Hopefully, Juan Soto will be a part of it. Hopefully, they can get one of the top flight free agents that they've continued to strike out on. But the onus now falls on that front office, on that ownership group. Farhan Zaidi has been at the helm for years now, and they've since made some changes, of course. Buster Posey is in there, kind of a player voice in the clubhouse, or player voice in the front office now. So we'll see if that yields dividends for that Giants organization. Now, I told you guys we'd be getting into some trade possibilities. We will here as well. But after the trades, I want to get into some other team building things that we're seeing start to percolate out of the winter, or as we get towards the winter meetings anyway. So let's go ahead and get into some trades, shall we? All right. So one of the biggest trade targets out there has to be Devin Williams. Devin Williams has been long connected to pretty much any team who needs some relief help out there. We're talking about the LA Dodgers, the New York Mets, the New York Yankees, pretty much any of the World Series contending teams that are looking for bullpen help are all looking at the possibility of adding Devin Williams. So Devin Williams, of course, had the injury last year, has seen ups and downs in his performance overall. But he's still an exemplary pitcher, especially when you consider the talent that he possesses and the contract that he's on. So Brewers would be wise to try to capitalize on him. They've missed the opportunity to capitalize on Willy Adames. Adames is going to leave in free agency for next to nothing. Of course, they could get compensation because of the qualifying offer, all that, but it's nothing compared to the compensation they would have gotten via trade if they had moved him before the start of the year last year. Of course, they had a young core coming up. Maybe they just wanted to have a veteran in the clubhouse all year long. And ultimately, it worked out for them. They were able to make a nice run, have a 90-plus win campaign, and win the division, get into the postseason. But ultimately, they didn't win a World Series out of it. And ultimately, the long-term future of their franchise is a little bit less because they did not reap the rewards of the trade of a Willy Adames. Now, would they have gotten to 93 wins without Willy Adames? Probably not. Would the young core have performed as well without Willy Adames? Probably not. But I am saying that a team that usually has to churn over their roster to continue to stay competitive missed an opportunity to continue to do that with a very valuable piece. I think the Dodgers would have paid a pretty penny for him last year. They might get him for nothing this offseason. He is in the Willy Adames market does stretch out there to the Dodgers. But speaking of the Brewers right now, I would really like to see them move on from a guy like Devin Williams. There's so many good closers out there. But there are so few of them to go around. You look at all the teams out there that are looking for some relief pitching, it's pretty much every single one of them. The contenders are all looking for at least a setup guy, if not a closer. Tanner Scott, probably one of the best on the market. Carlos Estevez as well. Curious to see where the relief market goes. We just saw Aroldis Chapman, a proven closer at one point in his career, still has a high strikeout rate. But the numbers aren't exactly quite as good as what we're used to seeing out of Aroldis Chapman. But he's still very effective. He managed to get $10.75 million this morning from the Boston Red Sox. We saw the Instagram post of him this morning with the Boston Red Sox cap on. He looked good in it. Hopefully he has a good year with Boston. But that's another relief arm off the board. Ryan Helsley of the St. Louis Cardinals is expected to be traded as well. There is some belief that the Cleveland Guardians could also move on from Emmanuel Clase. Devin Williams, of course, is on the market as well. Curious to see which teams ultimately move on from them. I believe Helsley is 100% gone from the St. Louis Cardinals. I think it would be foolhardy to take him into the season because if he blows an arm during the year, I mean, you're losing him. You're basically capitalizing on this market right now where you're trying to rebuild in a one-year turnaround kind of a thing, and you're not maximizing the value of one of your most valuable pieces in Ryan Helsley. Devin Williams I value very similarly. But I would say the ceiling for Williams is a little higher than the ceiling for Helsley. So a team like the Dodgers, I think, would be a great fit out there for Devin Williams. Let us know in the comments section what you think about the trade possibility of a Devin Williams, a Ryan Helsley. We'll get into Nolan Arenado in just a moment as well. Welcome in, Anthony. Welcome in, John. Appreciate you guys joining us once again. We just spoke about the Blue Jays just a few moments ago about them possibly being the high bidder for Juan Soto out of all of the teams that are in that running for him. Now, that's a little bit surprising, as I mentioned, with the Mets and Dodgers still in there. But the Blue Jays are trying to compete this year, trying to push their chips to the middle to save their front office. Their jobs are all on the line. They don't win a playoff series I would imagine that front office is going to see some big-time shakeups, and ultimately the long-term future of that franchise could be hindered because of the short-sighted nature of this offseason plan for the Toronto Blue Jays. So, Blue Jays fans, hopefully you guys have a great run this year, win the World Series, because the long-term future of your franchise, if it doesn't work out, could get ugly really quick. So, welcome in John, playing general manager for the Rangers. I'd invest in Roki Sasaki over Soto. Roki is only 23, and it wouldn't take $600 to $700 million to bring in Roki. I think every general manager in the sport would agree with you, John. The reason being, he's going to cost, what, $5 million? He's 23 years old. He's going to be posted here in the next, 2-3 weeks, because they want him to be eligible for the next year's post-signing period for international free agents. That way, you don't have to undo all the contracts that you've already agreed to towards the end of this year. But the team that signs him is basically giving up the possibility of signing any other international free agents. He is that good of a talent. He's immediately going to go into your rotation and very well could be the number one in your rotation by the end of the season. He is that dominant of a starting pitcher, and the Dodgers are long expected to be the favorite for him. But we've seen some reporting out there that they may not be the only team in there. We knew that other teams are going to be in there, but Sasaki might look at the Dodgers and say, this is just too much talent. There's no way I'm going to be able to hone my craft and be myself in that market. I want to go somewhere else. But I would still put the favorite as the Dodgers at over an 80% chance to bring him in. The other teams that are in the mix still would be pretty much the teams you'd expect. Teams that have been connected with international free agents before. Yankees, Mets, Mariners, Padres, Giants, Rangers. All those teams I would expect to have some conversations with Roki Sasaki. Braves would be another fit for him as well, in my opinion. I don't think they have too much track record with international free agents, but I still think he'd be a great get for them because they are really thin on that starting pitching front. They don't have a lot of depth in the minor leagues coming either, so he would kind of be their stopgap solution, or their stop solution here to kind of stop the slide of pieces leaving town, especially if Max Fried possibly leaving for the Boston Red Sox or for another top-paying job elsewhere. But as far as the Juan Soto argument, I don't think the Rangers have the money to go out there and get it done. I know Evan Grant posted this earlier this offseason anyway, that the Rangers had roughly $40 million. They absolutely could be in the market for Juan Soto, and then just try to save a little bit of money here and there, trade a guy, and bring back Eovaldi, and then just go bare bones with the bullpen. They could absolutely do that. I don't think that's the way they're going to go. That's not the way this organization has been run with Chris Young at the helm. With him at the helm, they want to go pitching, and more pitching, and it's worked for them. It got them a World Series. Injuries last year, poor performance, really kind of nipped their repeat bid in the bud. They're kind of hoping for more spending this year from ownership, allowing them to go out there and try to add some pieces. They're still said to be in the market for, we're talking about trades here, about them possibly bringing in Jordan Montgomery as well via trade. The trade here on the screen has them acquiring Devin Williams. They are looking for bullpen help. They are looking for starting pitching. They also need to add to that lineup. They brought in Higashioka, but that's more of a backup catcher, 1A, 1B situation with Jonah Heim. I still question the offense from that position after Heim had such a terrible year last year. I do think there'll be some bounce back. The question is, how much will there be? Is it just the playing time was just overwhelming for him and he needed a year to kind of get back right to being himself again? Maybe next year he'll be a lot better. Could absolutely happen. But I still have my question marks there. When the Rangers won their World Series, they had Garver and Heim, two offensive players at the catcher position. Heim has since regressed. Higashioka isn't exactly a world beater as far as an offensive weapon. Does have some pop, but he's never going to be an on-base guy for you or a guy that drives the offense. That's my question mark there. And they still have some question marks in their outfield. What are they going to do if Aroldis Garcia, who seemed to struggle after his collision with Marcus Semien in late May, if he doesn't come back, the Aroldis Garcia that we've seen in years past? Do they go ahead and move on from Aroldis Garcia, trade him for what they can now, possibly reinvest that money by bringing in a free agent? Do they go after an improvement over Nathaniel Lowe? Do they go after a corner outfield guy like an Anthony Santander or a Juan Soto? All of those things are on the table. Does Evan Carter come back healthy? How does he look in his second year? Wyatt Langford, I think, is going to be a great sophomore campaign. So those of you who might have sold a little bit this offseason of Wyatt Langford stock, I'm buying every single bit of it. He has so much more power than what he showed in the first season. and that does translate to the field. We saw that in all of the levels of the minor leagues that he cruised through, and he's too good of a hitter to not let that power come through, and I think he's really going to show it next year. So expect a big second year from Wyatt Langford. The bigger question for me in that outfield has got to center around Leody Taveras. That offense, once again, absolutely cratered, and I just think it's time he needs to be a fourth outfielder or a defensive first guy only, and then you just realize, hey, there's limitations here. You know, if we have the opportunity, I'd rather start Langford or Carter in center field, bring in another proven everyday bat for left field, and use Taveras in the kind of Travis Jankowski role, fourth outfielder type. So that's how I would look at things if I'm a Texas Rangers fan. John, I know you are, so hopefully the Rangers can get something done. They're still looking at bringing in Eovaldi and Heaney. They're looking at the possibility of bringing in Sasaki, trading for a Montgomery. They're also been connected to Sean Manaea quite a bit this offseason. A number of publications out there are predicting Sean Manaea signs a 2-year, $45 million deal with the Texas Rangers. I would say if they're going to go at that number, they'd rather bring back Nathan Eovaldi, just the connection, proven performance, Bochy guy, all those kinds of things, rather than bring in an outside guy. I'm not saying that they wouldn't go after a Sean Manaea, but I'm saying they would rather have an Eovaldi or a Heaney. Welcome in, Vinny. Welcome in. Appreciate you guys joining us. Now, as I mentioned, we wanted to talk a little bit about trades here, and one that I wanted to mention specifically, I've got a video coming out tomorrow morning about Nolan Arenado. The market for Nolan is starting to heat up, but there are so many teams that are in on Juan Soto that are also in the market for a Nolan Arenado or a Cody Bellinger that it's going to hold things up. I would expect those deals to happen around the time Soto gets done or after, but certainly not before. We're not talking like a week before. They're like, we'll go ahead and dip out of the Soto running because we have a real chance to bring in, you know, a Bellinger or a Arenado. I think those markets are going to be held up by the Soto bidding. Now, if they get outbid in the Soto bidding, say the Yankees decide they want to, you know, lock down their first base option with Cody Bellinger and they're out of the bidding because they can't afford a guy like Juan Soto, they dip out, bring in Cody Bellinger, they say all the right things to the media. Well, we didn't want to sit on our hands. We wanted to still go out there and address our plan and try to continue to improve our team, even though, you know, the bidding is still going on for Juan Soto. We're not out, but we realized there are other priorities we needed to address, and so we went out there and got the job done, bringing in Cody Bellinger. We are still in there for Juan Soto. Don't believe any other headlines out there, is what they would tell the New York media. As a member of the New York media or a fan of the New York Yankees, I would immediately go to Brian Cashman and say, bull. That's the signal, that's the white flag saying you're out of the running. But those are kind of the trade targets I'm seeing right now on the market that are going to be moved relatively early on in the offseason. I don't think either one of those cases are going to go into January or February. I'd expect them to get resolved around Christmas at the latest. Vlad can go to the Mets, maybe, but the Blue Jays are trying to go all in right now in the effort to bring in Juan Soto. Even if they don't bring in Juan Soto, I expect them to spend at the top of the market to bring in a top-flight starting pitcher, a Burns, a Fried, maybe even a Santander in the outfield. There are some big-time options out there for the Blue Jays. I don't expect Vlad to move anywhere unless they're out of it by the trade deadline. At the trade deadline, maybe they turn around and trade him. You know, if the Mets miss out on bringing in Alonso or Walker, then they're going to have a hole at first base. So those are all things that need to be considered. But going back to our original point here with Nolan Arenado, there are so many teams that view him as a third base only option. He has been a very good defensive third baseman for, a decade plus now. But his defense has started to slip a little bit. He's still an above average defender, but he is also capable of playing first base, DHing if you need him to. He can be a marginal utility player to some extent. Now, expecting him to be a catcher or a shortstop is a little bit out of the question, but the versatility is there for Nolan Arenado that if you have a third baseman already, like the Boston Red Sox are one of the teams that's been most aggressive after him, if maybe they put him at third base, move Devers over, or vice versa. There are opportunities there for them to get something like that done. Say the Houston Astros, one of the teams that's in there for him as well, says, hey, we really want to bring you in. We signed Alex Bregman. We move you over to first base. Our defense looks so much better with that alignment with Arenado, Altuve. I can see his face anyway. I can't remember his name. Shortstop for the Astros. Wasn't he the World Series MVP or the ALCS MVP? I can't remember his name. Anyway, Bregman at third base. That would be a great defensive infield for the Houston Astros and a serious upgrade at first base for them. Other teams that are in the market for Arenado include the Dodgers, of course. But there are so many teams out there that with Juan Soto holding things up, that they haven't even announced themselves to be in the running for those players yet, which is why I'm expecting it to happen around the time Juan Soto gets traded or after, but I would expect it before Christmas. I think Arenado is going to get a deal done. Cardinals are rebuilding, and they do not need to hold on to a veteran that's eating up at bats for their younger players. They can easily go out there and sign a guy off the free agent heap for 1 year, $4 million to give them the veteran leadership that Nolan Arenado does. I'm not saying it's not valuable. I'm not saying Nolan Arenado is only worth a $4 million player. But what I am saying is that the Cardinals are entering a rebuild phase of their organization right now. They're hoping to keep it only to 1 year. By opening up at bats, gets those young guys more time to turn things around at the major league level quicker. Nolan Gorman gets more consistent at bats. Jordan Walker, everybody. By having him out of the lineup, it raises all boats, just because the availability of playing time. Now, they're not expecting to win 100 games. They're not trying to win 100 games, but they're also not trying to lose 100 games. They're trying to give their young guys a chance to succeed, much like the Brewers did last year. They kept a couple of veterans around, i.e. the 1 year, $4 million type of players is what the Cardinals would be using here to allow those young guys to have some at-bats at the major league level to find some consistency. And then, of course, the bullpen, they're trading Ryan Helsley. I believe he will definitely go. He and Williams, I would imagine, are the top two relief arms on the trade block right now. The other one would be Emmanuel Clase. I'm not sure how well the Guardians are going to move him. I think it would take an overwhelming package. They are said to be trying to sell all out for this year. They realize that they have an opportunity here to maximize on their chance to win a World Series. They're trying to push their chips to the center. Now, that phrase takes on a different meaning for the Guardians than it does, say, like the LA Dodgers. Dodgers can go out there and get an Ohtani, a Yamamoto, a Glasnow, a Soto, a Snell, and keep on going. Guardians couldn't afford one of those deals. So if they're going to go all in, quote unquote, we're talking about a Nathan Eovaldi type, bringing back a Shane Bieber, adding an outfield bat, a Santander would probably be at the peak of what they could afford. Anything beyond that is a little bit out of their price range, but that would be going all in for the Guardians. They were a great team last year, AL Central. They ran away with it in the second half, and their starting pitching has always been a great piece on that roster. They're going to get some of those guys back healthy, and I would expect that starting pitching to continue to work for them. Now, Clase, if he gets traded, that leaves a big hole back there, which is why I believe Helsley and Williams are more likely to be moved. But if you can convince them to move on from a Clase and offer them a bigger piece up in return, say if you're offering a prime Pedro Martinez, for instance, something like that, they could get something like that done, absolutely. But short of an offer that's, unquestionably better for the Guardians, I think they're likely to hold on to Emmanuel Clase. Now, Williams for the Brewers, I think he's very likely to move. I think Helsley will move before the start of the season, but it's just a matter of where they will go. Yankees, as I mentioned, are in the mix. Pretty much any team that needs closing help. Mets, Blue Jays, Rangers, Cubs to a certain extent, Dodgers. Those are all teams that are in the mix for a Helsley or a Williams. So let us know in the comment section where you guys think they're going to go. Appreciate you guys taking the time. Let's go ahead and make some trades here and kind of scroll through a few more of these. Maybe we'll spot another trade opportunity. In fact, here's one right off the bat here with Helsley and Arenado. Arenado going to the Red Sox. That's where John Paul Morosi is hearing the most conversation about him going. Helsley going to the Nationals. I don't necessarily buy that. Why? Because the Nationals aren't exactly a closer away from winning a World Series. Now, the teams that are, a closer away, those are the teams I'd expect to be in there for Ryan Helsley that would pay a higher premium. So for this one here, I would go ahead and just cross that one off. That's never going to happen. Here's another one here with Wilyer Abreu from the Red Sox along with Casas. Two pieces go for a couple of starting pitchers, Castillo and Wu. That's an incredible trade. I'm going to go ahead and say no already, but let's go ahead and get into this one just a little bit. Abreu is available from the Red Sox. They do have some young pieces coming. They have a phenom coming out there in the outfield right behind Abreu, who could very well break camp with them break camp with them to start the season. Abreu is available to a certain extent, even though he was very, very good for them in his first year there. Casas, of course, has some great value there, but the Red Sox are looking for some starting pitching. I'm not sure how far this moves the needle for them. Castillo's a good starting pitcher. I take that back. He's a very good starting pitcher. but he's a little bit older, higher money, all those kinds of things. Wu is the real get here. Young, controllable starting pitching is so hard to find. Brayu and Wu straight up, I think that would be a real conversation. Castillo, I think, would be a little bit of a too big of an ask for the Red Sox to be able to get both of those starting pitchers. Now, Brayu and maybe a couple other lower level minor league prospects, say a 10 or 15 value instead of Cassis, I think would be more appealing. But a trade like that would be a little bit more appealing to both sides. Take out Cassis, take out Castillo, add a few more pieces on the Red Sox side going to the Mariners, and then you could have a deal there. Sam Huff, this is more of just roster clearing here. Rangers, I think, aren't going to use Sam Huff at any point on the Major League roster. They just don't seem to trust him, so they need to move him on and give him a chance to play elsewhere. So this is a trade to make that kind of thing happen there. Let's see if anything else catches the eye here. Nico Hoerner possibly being traded. That would be something I would have considered if he had not been injured. There was some talk about him being the get if Singer would have gone to the Cubs instead of Jonathan India. If Hoerner had been healthy, I think that would have happened. But unfortunately, he's not healthy. Big question marks around it. There's no way they're going to move him until he shows his worth on the field again. But Garrett Crochet, the best starting pitcher on the market right now as far as the trade market goes, I do expect him to get moved. Now, the Orioles are seemingly the most logical fit here. Cost-wise, all those kinds of things have to come into play here with the Orioles. They seem to be priced out already to some extent with the Corbin Burns type of free agent. They're said to be in there for Shane Bieber, Nathan Eovaldi, Max Fried. I'll believe it when I see it on a lot of these guys, but they do need to add a frontline starting pitcher and then another number 2 in that rotation as well. This is a team that's ready to win the American League and possibly the World Series. But if they don't have Corbin Burns, they have some serious holes in that rotation they're going to have to solve. And if they don't do so by bringing in a Crochet and an Eovaldi and a Bieber, some type of combination of that, there's a serious step back coming for the Orioles. Now, same thing goes with the New York Yankees. If they don't bring back Soto, I know they keep telling everybody we have a Yankee system that's getting better. We have so many good pieces on our roster. But we saw how that roster looked when Juan Soto was out. And Aaron Judge was stuck in the middle of that lineup with nothing else around him. There's not a lot of protection there. And I just wonder how good the Yankees really are without those 2 aircraft carriers holding things down in that lineup for 162 games. Now, they did improve some of the pieces around them, and they're going to add a first baseman. I'm sure they'll add an outfielder. I'm sure they'll add some bullpen. But they aren't exactly the ready-made contender to win the World Series on the American League side as currently constructed. Bring back Juan Soto, and they're right back in that conversation. You don't. You have some big holes and big question marks to answer before we can consider you in that same category. Vinny, with White Sox season last year, they will make any moves. Yes, I do believe they will. I think Crochet probably gets moved, much like we saw with the Dylan Cease argument that we thought they should have traded him at the deadline the year before. They waited throughout the offseason, then ultimately got the deal that they wanted from the Padres right at the beginning of the season. I think they're going to have something very similar with Crochet. Hopefully it doesn't go all the way into February, though. Hopefully it gets time to kind of get settled in there, get the long-term deal, all that kind of things sorted out. But that's a team that's going to be making some moves around the edges. And a trade like this where they get pieces that are like Martinez that we discussed last night that's underperforming in the Blue Jays organization, maybe he recaptures some of that on a rebuilding club like the White Sox. But, they're not going to move on from Vlad Guerrero Jr. just to add, Robert or Nico Hoerner. Another piece that's going to be moved at some point this offseason, I believe, is Luis Robert. The biggest connection probably has been to the Philadelphia Phillies as of late, but he could go pretty much anywhere. The Mets are said to have at least kicked the tires on it. The big question there is money and injuries. If he's a healthy player, 162 games, the money's obviously worth it and the performance is there. If it's not, if he's injured, those are all big question marks that kind of have slowed him down for the better part of his career. Let's go ahead and finish out this page a little bit, and then we'll kind of make a trade, and then we'll move on to kind of just the finishing touches on tonight's conversation anyway. Alrighty, we talked a little bit about Nolan Arenado already. Braves move on from Kelenic. I don't think that happens. The Pirates are looking for offense, but I don't think a trade like that makes a whole lot of sense for them. Ashcraft would be a good depth piece for the Braves, but I don't think they're moving on from Kelenic unless they get another outfielder in there that solves some of their issues, leadoff issues, etc. Now, Cunha is going to be coming back. You know, they obviously he'll be at the top of that lineup when he's there, but Kelenic at times proved to be valuable for the Braves, and until they have a solution already for him, I don't think they'd do that type of a move. Luis Robert. This is another trade here that I want to touch on here. Brent Rooker was expected to have been moved at the trade deadline last year. The A's decided our offense is finally starting to click, and they did have a good offense, especially in the second half. Butler really started to prove himself. Rooker really looked a lot more consistent as well. But was that the best season Rooker's ever going to have? That's why pundits out there were saying, hey, this is the time where you maximize, trade Brent Rooker, keep things going, do things your Oakland A's way as you always have, and move on from there. I guess we can't call them the Oakland A's anymore. I guess we can call them the Las Vegas Athletics of Sacramento this year, or the Athletics Baseball Club, one of those options. But Rooker is not going to be traded. The Athletics have already made that very clear. They like the offense that they have. They want to continue to add some pitching to their staff. So if they're going to make a move, it's not going to be to trade Rooker or Butler or any of their major offensive cogs. They're looking to add some pitching, and I would expect them to do so by doing, your lower level trades, trading from that bullpen, and kind of going from there. One piece that also has been mentioned this offseason has been Alec Boehm of the Philadelphia Phillies. Phillies are looking to get aggressive this offseason. Originally, the consensus was Nick Castellanos was the piece that was going to go easiest to move because, he doesn't fit as well as some of the other pieces on that roster. But, of course, the market told them otherwise, that the market wasn't exactly giving much in return for Castellanos. So you're going to have to trade a player like Boehm, which could open up a free agency spot for Bregman or Adames. Both of those players have been in contact with the Philadelphia Phillies in the event that Boehm does get moved for a bigger trade out there for like a starting pitcher or a corner outfield or whatever they decide to do. But Boehm is certainly out there on the market. Now, the Mariners are looking for some offense. He would make some sense out there, solve their problems at third base. Pretty much any bat right now that can prove to be at least league average would be a boon for the Seattle Mariners. They've struggled to continue to get consistent major league at bats out of the players that they have on their roster. Now, they did a nice job at the trade deadline, trying to add a piece here and a piece there, Justin Turner, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But it still hasn't been the aircraft carrier type of piece that they've been looking for the past 4 or 5 years. They need a piece to go along with Julio Rodriguez so that when he is out of the lineup with injury, like he has been each of the last couple of years, they have somebody else that they can go to where their offense just doesn't completely crater out. And when Julio Rodriguez is in the lineup, he is known to go for months without hitting, and then all of a sudden he'll go for the last 3 months of the year on a 400-plus pace with 20-plus home runs and another 50 RBIs in a span of like 30, 45 days. That's just the kind of player Julio Rodriguez has turned into, a very streaky, very highly accomplished player, but those streaks, those ebbs and flows in that offense, how much you're reliant upon one player are all big problems for that Seattle Mariners front office to be able to solve, and I believe they will add at least one major offensive piece this offseason, whether that be a third baseman, a corner outfielder. Maybe they surprise us all and bring in Juan Soto. Unlikely, but maybe that's something that could happen. Let's go ahead and finish and do a trade here. Let's go ahead and pull up. I know we get a few Cardinals fans in here, so let's go ahead and do a two-team trade here. I already signed in. Why is it not letting me sign in again? Hold on just a second, guys. Okay. Maybe it had just been too long since I signed in. Okay. Let's go ahead and do the Cardinals because I want to do Nolan Arenado. That way you guys can see where his market is at. We're going to look at majors only. We're going to do... There is Nolan Arenado right at the top. Now, where do we want to trade Nolan Arenado to? I'm going to go ahead and say the Dodgers because they've been looking after him for, 5-6 years anyway, since he was with the Colorado Rockies. I think he'd be a great fit out there at third base. Muncy could then move all over the infield along with Edman. They put Muncy at DH sometimes, of course. But what would a trade look like? They have more than willing to take on the money of an Arenado, so they don't really need the Cardinals to eat money here. So what would it take to move him to the Dodgers? Let's go over to the Dodgers. We're probably talking about a couple of decent pieces here. Probably in the... Let's go ahead and do one more page here. Cartaya has had some good prospect value at times. Things have not worked out behind the plate for Contreras, but they have a catcher they already believe in. But if they have a tandem with Cartaya behind the plate, that might work as well. And then let's say they throw in a young first base. Let's go ahead and do a starting pitcher prospect here. Low cost options here. So the value obviously doesn't look right because you're looking almost 7 going to the Cardinals. Meanwhile, the Dodgers are eating the money on an Arenado and still getting hosed in total value here. So what would have to happen here? Like I said, the Dodgers aren't exactly looking for money, but maybe the Cardinals work out something to get the better prospects in order to get it done. Now the Dodgers are trying to save on their CBT by deferring as much money as they possibly can on their free agency deals. So maybe that's one way the Cardinals could do it, or convince the Dodgers to do it by saying, hey, you're trying to defer all this money. Why are you defeating the purpose by bringing in a Nolan Arenado and not having us eat some of the money so that way we can get a better prospect in return? So if they did something like that, let's go ahead and go all the way down here. We're going to add, say, I don't know, 20 million. Let's go ahead and say 25 million to the Dodgers. Add cash. Make sure I did that right. There we go. Now this is a trade that could possibly work. Let's go ahead and validate the trade. It's a minor overpay, but for a team like the Dodgers to get another proven competitor in Nolan Arenado, this would be a very comparable trade to what I would expect him to ultimately go for. Say the Astros are the team that ultimately tries to go after him. I would expect the Astros to try to convince the Cardinals to eat a little bit of money. Their farm system is very depleted, so they don't have too much wiggle room with what prospects they're going to hold on to. But they might specify 1 or 2 prospects that they don't want to give up and then just say, hey, pick 2 of the other guys. Cardinals, of course, would be very happy with something like that. And then, of course, the Yankees are said to be involved here. Red Sox are the most commonly referenced team in relation to Nolan Arenado. If they were to do something like that, maybe that completely takes them out of the running for a Juan Soto right off the bat. But they're one of the few teams that's pushing the Nolan Arenado agenda a little bit before Juan Soto does ultimately get moved. So what do you guys think of the trade? Where do you think he goes? Other trade possibilities, like I mentioned, are some of those relievers out there. Helsley, Williams, some of the starting pitchers. Garrett Crochet is one of those guys that I would expect to be moved as well. One last note before we kind of hang things up for tonight is where the first base market really sits. There was some headlines made yesterday, earlier this morning anyway, with Scott Boras basically telling teams out there that Pete is prepared to move on from New York. There was a reporter out there that basically tweeted that out there and with the hashtag grain of salt with it. Understandably, Scott Boras is trying to drive up the market for his best player. To say that he's not ready to leave New York would only depress prices and keep teams from bidding to their highest number rather than just allowing them to go out there and believe that they have a legitimate chance to be able to sign him. Now, if that is the case, that's great news for the market because it means we're going to get some movement out there in free agency. The Mets would then have to add a first baseman wherever he goes, solves their first base issues, and possibly signs other players that we weren't expecting because they brought in Pete Alonso. All those dominoes are going to fall. Now, the other first basemen that are out there besides Alonso, you got Christian Walker, to me, is the better value in the first base market in free agency. You have Goldschmidt out there as well. Then, of course, the trade market, you got Yandy Diaz. Maybe the Rangers move on from Nathaniel Lowe if they bring in a guy like Pete Alonso to upgrade their offense. All these things are on the table for a first baseman. We'll see where the market ultimately goes. But the top of the market has to begin with Pete Alonso, at least from a money perspective. But I think the better value and the better piece is Christian Walker. He's a little bit older when he finally hit free agency. He's by far the better defender than Pete Alonso, more athletic as well. And the pop is starting to come along. We started to see that last year with the Arizona Diamondbacks. If he continues on his offensive trajectory, he might be a better overall offensive player than Pete Alonso. But I think the power is unquestionably with Pete Alonso right now. But as Boras said, maybe he's looking to move elsewhere. Maybe he just wants to get the biggest dollar value out there. Maybe he's a lifelong Met and just wants to scare the Mets into giving him, a legitimate, big-time offer out there. All of those things are on the table. But that's kind of where the first base market sits right now. But we'll see where, Alonso goes. Walker, Diaz, I do expect to be moved at some point. Rays are always looking to do something. But as I mentioned off the top of our video anyway, some teams that are not usually all in. The Royals are looking to make some additions. The Guardians are looking to kind of sell out for them. to try to win a series this year. Dodgers, of course, are all the way in on the National League side. Phillies are looking to shake things up and compete with the Dodgers, of course. Braves have been very good over the last several years. We'll see what happens with what moves they are going to make. The Rangers just won a World Series, are unhappy with how the year ended last year, and they have 40 plus, maybe 60 plus million dollars to spend, so they are going to be able to add some big time pieces to that roster. Do not expect them to go what they did last year and just do the $5-10 million route on a couple of guys and call it good. They're going to add a couple of starting pitchers, I do believe, a hitter, and a couple of relievers. So they just started their offseason bringing in Higashioka. We'll see what the next steps are for the Rangers. Thank you guys for joining us. As I said, we'll be live during the winter meetings. We'll cover the entirety of them. Make sure you guys hit that like and subscribe. Anything that happens, we will be the first. We'll be as quick as possible to get you guys to know what's going on from the winter meetings. And make sure you guys hit that like and subscribe. Follow us on X at Upside Ascend and on Facebook at Upside Sports Network. Thank you guys for joining us on a Tuesday evening. We'll see you guys tomorrow. And be on the lookout for some videos that we have coming out about Nolan Arenado and some of the other headlines from around Major League Baseball, the NFL, the NBA, and the NHL. Y'all have a great evening.